Do you care if it's made in America?
If you do, you'll want to stay tuned because we're doing the 6 months check-in on the Warther's 7-inch chef knife. Now, quick disclaimer, Warther's Cutlery did send me this knife completely free of charge, but they are aware that all of my reviews and feedback are 100% honest. So about a half a year ago, there were quite a few of you guys who were asking for all American made chef knife recommendations, and through my research I narrowed it down to Warther's Cutlery, and of course this list excludes any of the one-off blacksmith and custom bladesmiths that are all around the United States. For the past 6 months I've had this knife in rotation, and here is a pros and cons list. I guess a cons list is not really the right way to go about it because it's such a personal item. A knife is such a personal item. So these are just my personal preference and my feedback on this knife. So let's go ahead and start with the pros list and what I think this knife will be great for. The first thing is that this knife is extremely robust. This knife is built like a tank. So if you take care of this knife, this is easily a multi-generational item. After using this knife for 6 months, I actually believe that this knife will do better and excel outside of the kitchen. And what I mean by that is if you're looking for an outdoor camping or cooking knife, this will be a really good knife for the task. This knife is made with SV35N steel, and that is a very proven steel in the EDC and outdoor knife category. So I think this will be a good hybrid outdoor camping / cooking knife. Now with all that said, let's go ahead and move on to the feedback that I have for this knife. So the first thing on the list is comfort and fit and finish. So there are a couple areas that I think can use a little bit of improvement. The first thing is that there are some slight gaps in the handle scales. So if there are slight gaps in the handle scale, it's such a slight gap that I don't think it will be a structural issue, but when water gets stuck in it, no matter how good the steel is, just because it's stainless doesn't mean it's rust resistant. So if water do stay in there for quite a long time, it can still rust out the tang, and then it will become a structural issue. On the list is the handle scales itself have a lot of really harsh and hard corners. So when I was using this knife for the past 6 months and I'm grabbing onto it, there are a lot of these really sharp corners on these wooden scales that really dig into my hand. I mean, it's not a huge deal because you can really fix that with a little bit of elbow grease and some sandpaper and it will just knock these edges right down. But it's just one of those things that if you want a premium knife, these are things that you'll look for. Last thing on fit and finish and comfort is that the spine and the choil is a little bit on the sharper end, so it is a little bit more not as comfortable in the hands, but like I said before, it's a very easy fix. And if you want to know how to fix it, you can check out this video right here. It'll teach you how to crown your spine and also how to round out your choil. So the next thing I want to address is length. This 7-inch chef knife will be great for, like I said before, outdoor and camping, and for those of you guys who like a smaller chef knife. But personally, I would opt for the 9-inch version, so they do have a full-size 9-inch version of this knife, because I feel like the 9-inch version, if it is going to stay in the kitchen, the bigger knife is a little bit more versatile. So the next thing we want to talk about is edge retention and sharpening. So the knife did have fairly decent edge retention for a SV35N steel. What I did notice is that about 3 to 4 months into using the knife in my rotation, that it lost that really crispy razor sharpness. Like the knife was still sharp, but it just lost that bite, if that makes sense. So I ended up having to sharpen a knife, and so this is my experience sharpening this particular knife with this particular steel. I started with a King 1000 stone. As you guys know, that's one of my go-to stones, and didn't really do much. I felt like it wasn't really sharpening the knife at all. I actually dulled the knife a little bit. So I scratched off the 1000 grit stone, went with a 𝐒𝐔𝐏 1000. The 𝐒𝐔𝐏 1000 put a decent edge on it, but the edge didn't really have any bite at all. So I eventually spoke to one of my friends. He's just like, hey, why don't you try to go with a lower grit stone to give the knife a little bit more bite, and that the SV35N steel tends to have a little bit better edge when you go with lower grit stone. So I had a DMT plate laying around, which is a fine and extra fine side, so I decided to sharpen it on the fine side, and this is the edge from the fine side. I actually put a really good edge on it. The fine side on a Japanese industrial standard equivalent is about a 500 to 600 grit equivalent. So this is basically a 500 to 600 grit Japanese whetstone edge that's on here, and it is a very good edge. It has very good bite. That is my sharpening experience with this knife. Let's go ahead and grab a few things. Let's go ahead and show how it cuts, and then we'll keep moving on. I have some paper and a tomato here. I'm not going to go through a bunch of ingredients today to cut a bunch of different things because you can see that in the original video. This is just wanting to show you how the edge performs with the DMT fine side on this knife after sharpening. And just to show you guys, as you guys can see here, I mean, you can see that it performs pretty good. Like, it has a lot of bite to it. When I sharpened it on the 𝐸𝐶𝐋 and the 1K, it didn't even have enough bite to do that. Like, it actually just glided across the paper without biting into it. So that was not a good edge whatsoever. But this DMT off of the fine side with a raw leather strap, no compound, is actually the better of the edges. So as you guys can see, bam. The edge off of the DMT fine side is amazing on this knife. Let's go ahead and cut into the tomato. Oh, by the way, what do you guys think of the new cutting board? Got a new cutting board for myself because I'm starting to get into more Japanese knives, as some of you guys already know, speaking to me in the comments. Which for some of you guys also, it's probably pretty exciting to see that I'm starting to go into the Japanese knife rabbit hole. And I decided to grab a Asahi cutting board for my Japanese knives. Some of you guys were also requesting that we cut something different, like an onion and things like that. So here is a very small shallot. You can see, and you can see that it glides through it with no issues. So as you guys can see, the knife performs pretty well on food. And with all that being said, as I was cutting the onion, that led us to our next topic. And our last topic, it is the blade profile and the edge geometry. So as you guys can see, the edge profile of this knife is fairly unconventional. And what I mean by it's unconventional is that it has a very, very curved blade profile. And even in comparison to the German chef knives, which are pretty belly prominent, but even with a German chef knife, there's still a spot where it is pretty flat. Okay, even though it is belly prominent, that flat spot still allows you to do a little bit of chopping work. But whereas in this knife, there's little to no flat spot whatsoever. So it is a really good knife for rock cuts. But if you're even thinking about doing chop cuts at all, just don't even think about it. This knife doesn't perform chop cuts very well. So this leads us to our last point, and it is the edge geometry and the cutting feel of the knife. I think the edge geometry of this knife performs really well. It does have a different feel to it. If I'm going to try to make some sense out of this, is that it has a hybrid feeling to it where it doesn't feel like a very traditional chef knife. Okay, it has kind of a cross and hybrid feel between a chef knife and an EDC / outdoor knife, if that makes sense to you, because it performs the kitchen task well, but it just has a different feel to it. As you guys know, there are different levels of sharpness and there are different edge geometries for every different thing. You know, there's sharpness that is just for straight razors for shaving your face. There's kitchen knife sharpness. Then there's EDC and outdoor knife sharpness. They're all sharp, but just a different kind of sharp, if that makes sense to you. And this is what I feel out of this knife, is that it has a very good hybrid feel between a chef knife and kind of laying in between an EDC and outdoor knife as well. So that's why I think this knife will really excel in an outdoor cooking setting. So in conclusion, if you guys are looking for a knife to do more refined cuts and more delicate work, and if you like chop cuts and push cuts and sort of things like that, this is probably not going to be the knife for you. Whereas if you guys are looking for a more robust knife to do more heavy duty work and also possibly taking it to an outdoor setting, I think this will be a fantastic fit for you guys. Okay, so this wraps up our video for our 6-month check-in for the Warther's 7-inch chef knife, and I hope you guys liked the video. If you do like the video, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It would mean the world to me. It helps me support all of this madness, and I will see you guys next week. Bye.